Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. We know that when disasters hit our nation, we mayors are always called on to respond and to lead the way. I remember being at the Republican convention in 2008 in Minnesota, and Tom and staff and I were sitting in the war room that was created. It was the USCM emergency room, war room. We were there pulling together due to the Gulf and Hurricane Gustav. As I learned then, and as we learn every day and every time there is a disaster, there is a tendency for our state and federal partners to underappreciate the role of mayors in the immediate response to a major event. The Conference of Mayors has worked hard to make sure that Washington changes how it relates to us, how it relates to cities when there is a disaster. Our Stafford Act task force has done great work, and our recommendation deserves action. But this afternoon, we are going to focus on what must be done now to help our colleagues in the Gulf. Again, they are in need of our help, and we are gathered to offer that as well. So thank you, Mayor Marks. Thank you, Mayor Holden, for your leadership, and I look forward to hearing from all of the mayors on how we can help. But right now, we have Administrator Jackson. Lisa Jackson is on the line, and she wishes to address us. Judy?
Hi, it's Lisa Jackson.
Welcome, Lisa. Welcome.
How are you? And hello, mayors. Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to join you for a few minutes to talk about this very important matter, and thank you for your introduction. I wanted to just begin with very brief remarks and then allow you, Mayor, to perhaps have us moderate a discussion. But I thought it would be best to update everyone on the ongoing response. First, let me show my support and say thank you to the many mayors who've been involved with efforts in the Gulf. Many of them, understandably, are not able to join us even by phone today, and I think that's emblematic of exactly what you were saying, Mayor Kartz, which is the frontline nature of the work for many mayors there. I've taken 5 trips myself to the Gulf since this all began, and the meetings I've had and the people I've talked to, I've really gotten just a small taste of what it's like to be on the front lines of this issue. It's absolutely true that for mayors along the Gulf, this is a tragedy that is impacting the livelihoods of their families, their friends, and the rich wildlife and wetlands they've always known and loved. Now, our thoughts are with them and with the families of the 11 lost workers, actually with everyone who've been touched, by this crisis. I want to first say that rest assured that we are doing at the federal government everything in our power to respond to this unprecedented crisis. As you all know by now, the full response is being led by the Coast Guard. But that said, the administration has a tremendous amount of personnel mobilized across government to address the full range of challenges that we're seeing. There are more than 20,000 federal responders on the scene, and they are working around the clock. We have people from Homeland Security, from NOAA. After all, they are in charge of our oceans, and the Gulf is marine water for them. The Interior Department, the National Institutes of Occupational Safety and Health, and the Small Business Administration also playing a very critical role. And you also know that the president is set to visit the area again starting tomorrow. And just yesterday, I returned from my most recent trip. I want to say a few words about EPA. EPA's primary role is to monitor air, water, and sediment, first and foremost to alert local citizens and local officials if there are any threats to people's health. To keep the public updated, we've been using the highest level of transparency. In fact, I believe we set the standard and the bar. All the data that we collect ourselves, EPA, our contractors, is being posted on www.epa.gov/BP spill. So epa.gov/BP spill. Our team is gathering, studying, and posting all the information that we get, all the data that we take as soon and as quickly as we can. If it appears to be a lag in the posting of data, it's because it takes time to process, the raw numbers into a form that's not just numbers, but in some ways gives the public an interpretation, gives health professionals our best information. Now, the challenges has also forced EPA to make a few tough decisions. Most of those lie with the Corps and the Coast Guard in terms of ways to mitigate this disaster. But EPA has been, and I have been very personally involved on a pretty tough decision, and that's regarding the use of dispersants. I just want to be very clear that the steps were taken with dispersants, and I think they're very measured, reasonable steps, but they are in full recognition that dispersants represent a trade-off. It's very critical that we all remember that our number one enemy here is the oil, and that until we find a way to fully, and not just a little bit, fully stem the flow of oil, we have to take responsible actions. And in my view, we have to take any responsible action, responsible being the operative word, that will mitigate the impact of this ongoing release. And that's what we're doing. Dispersants are chemicals, but they are less toxic than the oil itself. They break down over weeks rather than remaining for several years as untreated oil might. But even with those two seemingly good pieces of news, we at EPA have taken affirmative steps to make sure that working with the Coast Guard, BP only applies dispersants when they're absolutely necessary. After scientific testing, we've determined that applying dispersants underwater at the source of the release works as well or probably better than using it on the surface, and it requires much, much less chemical to be used. We've moved to that method in recent weeks. We're relying on surface dispersants only when other methods of dealing with oil on the surface, methods like controlled burning, methods like skimming aren't feasible. Oftentimes that's because of weather or rough seas. So dispersants become a tool at the surface, but only after other tools have been exhausted. And EPA continues to call on BP through directives, through orders, to ramp down the amount being applied, and that we assure their compliance with. Finally, we're looking ahead at how we can assist impacted communities as they work through long-term challenges on the spill. That's going to require a serious commitment from the entire federal government. So, of course, we're going to stay engaged in this effort until the Coast Guard and its families and small businesses are back and feel as though they are all on the path of recovery, that the Gulf is on the path of recovery. And I believe that commitment is going to likely be measured in years, not months. It's also important that we learn from this tragedy the fact that one single accident at one single offshore well can cause billions of dollars in damage, results in thousands of people losing their job, threaten an entire region, and, of course, take lives. Highlights just how important it is that we have a better strategy for using and producing energy in our country. This administration is doing its part in that regard, too. We've taken major steps in the last 18 months to create clean energy jobs, build a foundation for renewables, called on Congress to pass real energy reform legislation. But there will be opportunities in the months ahead for every community to play a role in making America energy independent. And we're going to need to rely on your continued support for clean energy, energy efficiency, to lead a charge. Green city halls, I know many of you are the advocates for that, a fuel-efficient transit system. Conference of Mayors has been in the lead on that, a green roof, even on the public library. All of those changes that are epitomized in the conference's actions mean more sustainable communities and double, triple, quadruple our impact because we act together. They're the kind of innovations that will be critical to reaching real energy independence, creating new jobs, and making America the world's leader in clean technology. And that's going to start in your cities with your decisions, the plans that you will make now and in the coming months. So we want to help. EPA is eager to work with you, as always, with the Conference of Mayors to pick up on your creative sparks, to try to reinforce your creative messages, and in some cases continue along a path of transition to a cleaner energy economy. So with that, I'll thank you for all your hard work. Thank you for giving me a few minutes of your very valuable time today, and I'm happy to take some questions.
Thank you, Administrator Jackson. And we do have some questions for you. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. It's so important. It's a critical issue. And we have on our panel is Mayor Marks and also Mayor Holden. And Mayor Marks has a question for you.
Thank you very much, Madam Administrator, for your remarks. In addition to being a member of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, I happen to be president of the Florida League of Cities here in the city of Tallahassee. Although the city of Tallahassee may not be directly impacted ecologically by this disaster, certainly from an economical standpoint, we are going to feel it at some point in time once this disaster reaches our shores, and if we're not able to prevent that. One of the concerns that I have, and I've heard from many of our cities, one of the concerns that I have, that I've heard from many of our cities, is simply this, that they are not being engaged. They're not being, this matter is not being discussed with them. The conversations are between BP, the Incident Command, and our local communities, our counties, as well as our cities, are not being engaged in the conversation as to how to address this problem. And that is very serious, and we are concerned about that. Just yesterday or the day before, it was my understanding that as the oil slick began to move toward the Pensacola area, the local representatives in Pensacola only found out it was moving in that direction and how it was moving in that direction inadvertently through a telephone call that they were on. Nobody affirmatively reached out to them to let them know what was going on. And this has been something that I've heard, not necessarily consistently, but I've heard it over again, that local governments are being left out of the loop, and they're very concerned. I think that issue was raised even in Louisiana with the parish presidents about how they were being engaged and how they were being contacted with regards to this matter. Now, whether that's an issue with BP or with the Incident Command, the fact of the matter is we need local governments involved if we're going to resolve this problem. Are we doing anything to address that?
Thank you, Mayor. Let me just say that whatever we're doing, it sounds like we need to beef it up, as my kids would say. There is a lot going on. I have personally participated in meetings with mayors. I did one not long ago in Alabama. I was obviously, as I travel, whatever city I go to throughout, most of my travel to date's been to Louisiana, although I anticipate getting to Florida soon. I will meet with mayors. There have been conference calls, but let me give you.
We lost her.
We lost you.
She's probably talking, but she doesn't know that we're not hearing her.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? How many times do you lose people on these phones?
Is she back?
Are you there?
Hello? Yes. Hello?
We have the phone line, but she's not on it. We're trying to reestablish the communication.
Okay, is Mayor Landrieu on the line?
Yes, I am.
Welcome, Mayor Landrieu. I don't know if you caught some of the conversation and the remarks by Administrator Jackson. Did you catch any of that?
I was able to, and if I could just make a couple of comments. First of all, thank you all for being available for the emergency meeting yesterday morning. And I'm happy that Mayor Holden is there to give you on-site reaction from what's happening on the ground in Louisiana. It was a concern very early on that the communication was not strong between BP, the Coast Guard, and the parish president or the mayors. The way that has been clarified here was that BP and the Coast Guard have now embedded in each mayor's office of Homeland Security a Coast Guard representative and a BP representative, and that has sped it up a bit. I'm fairly sure, listening to the mayor's remarks, that that system hasn't made its way to Florida, and of course they need to keep pushing really hard until that line of communication is established. I would say that as needed as it is for the mayors to come down and help the Gulf Coast region and all of the other mayors down here, that this event is not just a matter of assisting a part of the country that has been hurt, although it is certainly that in the immediate future. This is going to have long-range implications for the country as a whole, and for those of us in Louisiana, and I'm sure our colleagues in Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida feel this as well. This is going to be a matter of national concern and national interest that's going to change policies for a very long period of time. And so, you know, we're really happy that y'all have agreed to come down. I believe we're planning on this Sunday and Monday so that you can get a first-hand look and a tour to see the on-land devastation that it's caused, you know, and the human consequences that are flowing from this catastrophic event. So I thank you for your interest, and I thank you for being willing to bring the might of the mayors down. I agree that the mayors are overlooked in terms of a long-term political power and philosophy, and that we are the direct link to the ground and, you know, on the front lines. And yeah. We ought to not be afraid to say so, and we ought to reach out really aggressively to grab the nation's attention in that regard.
Mayor Landrieu, Mayor Holden from Baton Rouge would like to comment on your on the remarks that you made, and also your question to him. So, Mayor Holden.
Thank you.
Hi, it's Lisa Jackson. Sorry, I am back. I'm not sure what happened there.
Okay. Hello, Lisa. We have Mayor Landrieu also on the line, and Mayor Holden is just going to respond, and then perhaps you can finish your remarks after that. But we've got Mayor Holden responding to Mayor Landrieu.
Thank you very much, Mitch. Good job as usual, but I wanted to just expand upon the fact that this goes beyond the Gulf Coast and look at some numbers here. Right now, the Gulf Coast region contributes $3 trillion annually to the United States economy. So it's a vital economic engine for our entire nation. It contributes more than 44% of the crude oil and 50% of the natural gas that fuels the nation. It yields 70% of the shrimp and oysters caught in the United States. Most of the country's waterfowl spend their vacations in the Gulf Coast. 7 of the nation's top 10 ports are in the Gulf of Mexico, with 2 in the top global 7. And so what is happening in the Gulf of Mexico affects each and every one of us around the country. And I think that's what Mitch was trying to indicate, that this is not just a regional situation. It really is a call to action for the whole nation.
Yeah, thank you. Administrator Jackson, are you still there?
I am here.
Okay. You were responding to Mayor Marks's remarks. I'm trying to remember where we are, and so you were responding to Mayor Marks's question.
The question related to Incident Command and communications between the Incident Command, local governments, and BP. We got somewhat of an answer from Mayor Landrieu that is moving slowly toward the Florida coast. What can we expect, I guess would be the question, in terms of that communication?
Well, I think you should expect, sir, that I think the only advantage, and I don't mean to put light all the things that have happened to my home state, but the only advantage for some place like Florida is that you've had the most time, and the Coast Guard in the incident command, I believe, has learned how important it is to move quickly in response to any potential shoreline incident, and to involve local governments and to really pick up communication. So I hope what you can expect is that you will see a response that will involve local government, that will also be communication heavy. There are, sir, a lot of what I will call in quotation experts out there whose only job is to apparently try to be on TV rather than have folks who the community needs to hear from and can trust out there. So local officials are the experts, and I think to the extent that you get or don't get information goes much of our success here in trying to keep people focused on what's really important. So I will, again, as I said in response to the last question, I'm not sure where I lost you all, make sure that the administration knows that the Conference of Mayors is not only a resource, but mayors feel that the success of this is vitally tied to our ability to engage your community.
Thank you very much, Madam Administrator.
Thank you. We have more questions, and there are mayors on the floor from Florida who are also concerned about the issue. And I'm going to go to Mayor Frank Cordes.
The mic's back there, Mayor.
Frank Cordes.
Yeah. Mayor Pembroke Pines, Florida.
Yeah. And then if you can just say your name and where you're from so the administrator can hear you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam President. Administrator Jackson, Frank Cordes from the city of Pembroke Pines, Florida. We border the Everglades, so we wouldn't think we'd be affected. But the other day, as I mentioned in the meeting, a young school child saw the news about how they washed the birds with Dawn soap. So he decided to try to get involved and get some Dawn soap, and it evolved into this huge thing where he went to school and everybody was delivering cases of Dawn soap. We don't see the vehicle to get that to where it's needed. We need some direction in that. So we are willing to do all of the work in that regard, but we need the direction of vehicle to get that component of soap to where it's needed to go. So that's my question, if you could help me on that. Thank you.
While he's coming up, Madam Administrator, the next question. I have a question about the future. Has any research, or what is the latest research, or the latest indication as to where the spill may go as it impacts Florida? I mean, I've heard some indications that it will go around the southern tip and up the East Coast, and then eventually get into the Gulf Stream and possibly go across the Gulf Stream over into Europe. Can we get some data from NOAA or other places that would at least give us some advanced indications, realizing weather patterns, realizing ocean currents and that kind of thing, but I would hope that we would be able to get some sort of advanced indication as much as we possibly can in that regard.
I think that's absolutely right, Mayor. First, it isn't entirely right. Let me be clear what I'm saying here. There is the loop current. You all know the currents in the Gulf near Florida much better than I do, and I grew up in Louisiana, so I won't lecture you on that. I'll say that all NOAA estimates to date show that right now there's an eddy that's keeping the oil from entering in any significant way the loop current, but that eddy can meet the loop current at any time, and they're keeping close eyes on that. As of yesterday, I haven't heard the forecast for today, that wasn't their primary concern. The other issue, just to know, is if the oil gets into the loop current, into the Gulf Stream, as you all know, that's a lot of water moving awfully fast. The question then becomes, would it just stay in the Gulf Stream and head on out, eventually making its way out into the Atlantic, somewhere east of Hatteras, North Carolina? That seems to be more the thinking. So two things on predictions. Every day on the Deepwater Horizon Response website, the daily predictions from NOAA are posted. I'm sure most of you have seen those. And I'm happy to work with the Conference of Mayors to get a NOAA-specific briefing on what they can and can't tell you. So you can know what they know, and you can also know how likely it is that even with all we know, a little bit like predicting the weather, what the chances are that something could get in front of us. I think you have to do prediction, and then I think you have to do surveillance, and there is a lot of both going on right now, but I think your request for a NOAA briefing would be something they would welcome doing for you.
Okay, thank you. And now can you answer Mayor Otis's desire to know where the Dawn soap can be sent?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely lovely. What a good kid. I will take it upon myself. Department of Interior, as you all know, is not the only, but it owns a lot of wildlife management areas and resource areas. And so they have, the Federal Department of Interior has, Fish and Wildlife has set up a lot of their own rescue stations. I will personally work with you, Madam President, to make sure we connect the mayor and his young constituent and all his good work with Department of Interior. We may also be able to talk to some of the state fish and wildlife agencies because they are as well involved in this. But I think the quickest way might be to get it to the good folks at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, if that's satisfactory.
That's great. And then if you can just direct them to get that information to the U.S. Conference of Mayors and Judy Sheehan, who will then coordinate the distribution of that information. We have another question on the floor.
Yes. Good afternoon, Ms. Jackson. Mayor Joy Cooper from the Hallandale Beach area. We're on the east coast of Florida. And just wanted to share with you some of the activities that have been taking place. I was looking for my counterparts here. I know that we have established in Broward County a task force of coastal mayors, and we've had our first briefing about 3 weeks ago. I know Palm Beach County has their task force, and I would imagine that Miami-Dade has theirs as well. And communication so far on that standpoint is really moving well, and we've coordinated with our emergency response coordinators and managers in those counties. So we kind of have the skeletal strategic setup response. The question in regards, really, when we met, of course, being east and not being eminently threatened at this point, just with the concern of tar balls, possibly in the future, we encourage that communication as rapidly as possible, certainly, because our residents are concerned about volunteering, about getting our coordination on the ground to make sure our beaches remain clean. And that's been our message, and I'd encourage everyone that's in this room and around the nation to remember that our beaches are open and they're clean. Our messages were, because of the communities we live in adjacent to port, we're familiar with them. So while we're very, very prudent in being prepared and setting up the strategies, I'd encourage your departments and everyone be at least communicative from a tourism standpoint that we are open and ready for business, particularly in Florida. Thank you.
Next.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Administrator Jackson. I'm Richard Kaplan, Mayor of the City of Lauderhill. I have a question. As of June 1st till November 1st, state of Florida and the states of the Gulf and up the East Coast began hurricane season. And for those of us that have been through hurricanes, they have a tendency of stirring up the waters like being in a blender. Has there been any thought or studies or reviews of the potential impacts of hurricanes as it may relate to dragging up the water and the oil into inland features?
Yes, Mayor Kaplan, there absolutely have been. NOAA, as I referred to them earlier, not only look at the current issues with respect to the oil, but they're also, of course, the National Weather Service. So they know hurricane season well. Their initial concerns became this idea of oily rain, this idea that the hurricane rain or even regular tropical rains that we all experience this time of year in the Gulf might somehow be oil instead of, or some portion oil. NOAA has said that there's no concern for that. They've also said that, as with most hurricanes, the main issue will be that the hurricane itself will disperse the oil. The force, the energy of the storm will disperse it. In some ways, dispersion is our best friend. I mean, it is the classic dilution being a solution, but it is one of the things that we count on when we're dealing with these massive volumes of oil that are going into our beloved Gulf. So the hurricane will almost certainly do some of that, and the hurricane could do the one thing that hasn't been a problem so far, which is introduce some amount of contamination over and above normal into fresh water. We have not, EPA tracks a lot of things, drinking water supplies and intakes. Most of those are in our freshwater systems. So we'll continue to be vigilant there as well. I don't mean to minimize the damage, sir, because, you're talking to a person who grew up in New Orleans, but I think it's fair to say that the hurricane threats themselves are likely to be as significant, if not more, than, say, the oil if you have a hurricane. What we would need to ensure is that any cleanup, just like is always done with rigs in the Gulf and oil in the Gulf, is very mindful of ensuring that we are done when that we really have figured out how clean is clean.
I thank you, and I'm glad that someone was looking into that specific issue.
Good.
Well, we'll get NOAA to include that in a briefing for the mayors as well, Judy. So we'll sort of broaden it and let NOAA give some comfort on a few issues.
Mm-hmm. Our next person.
Thank you, President Cotts. My name is William Ramos. I'm the Director of Intergovernmental Affairs for Secretary Gary Locke at the Department of Commerce. I want to thank Administrator Jackson for giving a very, very concise report back on what we are doing. The Department of Commerce has NOAA under us. So we've been heavily involved since the very beginning of the oil leakage. Every day at 3 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern Time, the White House and the National Incident Command Center coordinates a conference call with mayors and parish presidents on the Gulf Coast. We have a high rate of participation, and I invite those mayors who would like to join those to do so as well, and I can provide the information to the folks at the U.S. conference so that they can do so. We also have a 9:15 in the morning call with all the governors in the Gulf Coast that is coordinated by the White House, the National Incident Center. And every day we're providing the most updated trajectories of the oil. The Department of Commerce has declared fisheries disaster in all 4 of the Gulf states that are affected, and has been working very closely with all the governors and many of the mayors. Just yesterday had the opportunity to meet with Mayor Landrieu. And Secretary Locke was in Biloxi, he was in New Orleans, and he was also in Mobile, Alabama this past Thursday and Friday. So the Department of Commerce and others, we are heavily vested. For the last 7 weeks, we've just been very, very involved in the oil spill. So I'll provide the information about NOAA, and I can, through our department, we can coordinate then a deeper briefing for the Conference of Mayors coming out of NOAA as well.
Thank you. That's very good information. And if you can let our mayors know so they can sign up to get onto that conference call
Absolutely.
At 3 o'clock. So those mayors who are interested in being part of that daily briefing at 3, please make sure that you give your name to Mr. Ramos.
And I'd also like to add, we've had 3 conference calls with the Atlantic Coast governors from Maine down all the way to Florida to address some of the other issues of the possibility of, or if it does happen, that the oil hits the loop current and goes up the Atlantic coast. So.
We're going. Let's see. Mayor Holden has.
We don't have any governors here today.
Yeah, but we need to make sure that the mayors are engaged.
Okay.
No, exactly.
Yes, sir.
We're engaging everybody is my point, I guess.
And I hear exactly what you're saying. But right now in those coastal areas, you said you're involved with the fisheries and all of these different things, pulling everybody together. But in many cases right now, you have a situation where you've had families who've been fishing and all of these different other related things that happen out in the Gulf for decades. And yet many of them, as you saw on TV, they're talking about the loss of business. They're talking about the tourism effect. They're talking about having to close their stores. They're talking about the ripple effect. Even a bait and tackle store cannot survive. What about a plan put in place that basically says, here is what we will do in regards to small business loans, in regards to now analyzing the damage long term for all of these different entities impacted, in regards to maybe retraining people like we did when we had the base closures and base realignment, where we took it upon ourselves as a nation to say we will now train people in another job situation so at least they can have monies for their families and those things. I'm just trying to look at what comprehensive economic status are we presenting now other than reacting? What are we doing on the proactive side to really pull all of these things together to make sure these towns are not ghost towns?
That is a great question, Mr. Mayor. And one of the things that is being done, as you know, the Small Business Administration on May 14th and beyond has put out a number of loans to start working with just that population of business owners. I mean, at the Department of Commerce, we're not just involved through the NOAA side, but the Minority Business Development Administration is under Commerce. International Trade Administration, which includes tourism, is under Commerce, and so is the Economic Development Administration. So we're working as a tag team along with some of our other cohort in the other federal agencies to address those issues. We know that for some of these business folks, their boat is their business, and that's their office building. That is basically what is bringing the money in. So we're working. The frustration is there and is very merited, without a doubt. But we're working very hard in trying to get the assets over to the small business owners.
I've heard a little bit of that as well. The other thing that I've also heard, however...
Let me just, one thing, because we have Administrator Jackson that's still on the line waiting.
Thank you very much.
And
I'll be here at the conference.
Can we just come back to you later if there are questions for you? But let's make sure that we have, we address our questions to Administrator Jackson so that she can get on with her day. Please.
Good afternoon, Administrator Jackson, Mayor Randall Henderson from the city of Fort Myers, Florida, on the Gulf Coast. One of the frustrations that we have witnessed as the efforts are underway to clean, to protect, to guard against the intrusion of the oil on the Gulf Coast includes the conflict between EPA and Fish and Wildlife and other federal agencies in the way of dealing with laws that are on the books as we approach the cleanup effort. And would just like to know from your perspective how you're dealing with the legal conflicts that exist and the way that the cleanup is going about, because we're witnessing a lot of frustration from command down on the ground who run afoul of the legalities. How are you dealing with that between federal agencies?
Well, Mayor, the President's been very clear with the entire federal government, and EPA is certainly, I personally, and I'm about ensuring that each of my employees understands that time is of the essence in any response. Now, I will say to you, EPA has lots of experience in response. Although this is the Coast Guard's lead, we've worked with many of you and many counties and governors in hurricane response, in hazardous materials response. EPA is oftentimes, if this were not an oil spill, EPA could easily be leading the effort if it was on land. And so what the President has said and what my commitment is, sir, is that time is of the essence. That does not mean that every answer is a yes. It also doesn't mean that every answer, or even the majority of them, are no's, but that the most important thing we can do is to explain quickly, to get the right people in the room to try to make a decision. And if what is being discussed or planned or proffered isn't a good idea, to explain why, and then to do the really important next step, which is to figure out how to make something work. Because for many people, this is about the need to do whatever we can, all hands on deck, to try to be in front of this. And that means out-of-the-box thinking. What I will say, though, and sir, you know this well as all mayors do, that at the end of the day, the goal here is to make the environment better, not to do something that later will have unintended consequences. That's especially true in marsh areas, but can be true in beach areas. And I think we work very closely with what I call the resource agencies, NOAA and Fish and Wildlife, because oftentimes they even have more expertise than we do on what might work over a long period of time. But our commitment is simple. If the answer is no, We should be able to explain why quickly. It shouldn't be some bureaucratic regulatory citation. It should be a technical reason why this is not good for the environment in the long term, and then try to find a solution. And we've probably already turned around, I'm going to say close to 24 emergency permit requests from the U.S. Corps of Engineers for any number of opportunities on barrier islands and offshore work to try to stay in front of this. And we will continue to do that.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cochran.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being with us. Can you talk a little bit about the moratorium on drilling? I learned a lot in the meeting we had the other day with Mayor Landrieu. I mean, in some families, you have one family person, maybe the father, who's an oil rig worker, and mom and the oldest son have a boat. And so, as we've heard many people say, like T. Boone and others say, well, if a plane had gone down, you wouldn't stop all the airplanes. And so I'm very concerned about the economic side of Texas and Louisiana, and the drilling there. It seems like there are some that are shallow, some that are deep, and I think the American people need to have a better understanding. Can you comment on this? Mrs. Browner was talking about it over on Fox News 2 or 3 days ago, and it was somewhat confusing.
I'm happy to, Tom, and it's good to hear your voice. I'm sorry I can't be there. You've been such a supporter of so many things we both care about.
We love you and appreciate you taking this call.
No, not at all. And let me just say that we probably need to make sure I don't say anything wrong. So if anyone on this call is from Department of Interior and the Minerals Management Service in particular, correct me, because that is more their bailiwick than mine. The president's moratorium, and it is coming straight from President Obama, is really designed to look at what he defines as deep sea offshore drilling. Wells, that's exploration, not production side, and that's in water over 500 feet. So deep sea is defined as greater than 500 feet, and this does not apply to wells that have already been drilled and are producing oil and natural gas. Now, if someone were on who knows a lot more about this, I went to Tulane and got a ChemE, which is almost a petroleum degree, so I feel like I can talk a little bit. But I also know people will tell you that every rig that's out there, whether it's production or not, they're constantly changing operations, having to do things in order to make sure that they're sealing formations or getting enough pull, enough head. So there's a lot of day-to-day work that is going on. But primarily what happened is there are 33 drill rigs in deep water that were drilling that are affected by the moratorium, and DOI, Minerals Management Service, has told them basically to stand down operations, and they're in various stages of doing that. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge what you said, Tom, which is that many of the local communities are intricately tied to oil and natural gas production, and the president knows that. The local electeds and the governors have also made that clear. It's not a partisan thing. It's not an issue as to whether or not people believe in clean energy. It just is what it is. These are communities that, I guess the emblematic one is the Shrimp and Petroleum Festival, same festival, right? People celebrate both. And the president has said to his 6-month commission, the idea of the moratorium was to give the commission, which is headed up by former Senator Graham, former EPA Administrator Riley, the 6-month time frame to recommend first safety, to make sure these rigs are safe. 11 people died. And then recommend environmental controls, because I think we're all somewhat horrified at some of the things we're learning about the Minerals Management Service and other regulators in terms of the entire government. No entity of government is entirely without having had some role in allowing this rig to be sort of the cascade of errors that led to what happened on April 20th. So the president has said that if it can be done quicker than 6 months, he wants the recommendations quicker so that it should proceed as quickly and expeditiously as possible. But that is where we remain, and I know when we were in Louisiana, he felt and believe very strongly that this is work that must be done in order to assure that this work is done safely and with due diligence and oversight.
Okay. And there's another question on the floor.
Thank you. My name's Bill Mishler, mayor of the city of Pinellas Park in Florida, and also the president of the Pinellas County Mayor's Council, which encompasses Gulf Coast beaches from St. Petersburg Beach to Tarpon Springs, probably in excess of 40 miles. I talked to some of the mayors from the beach communities the other day, and their hotels are losing a lot of reservations. The reservations, people are canceling, even though BP has allotted, I think, $25 million to the state of Florida to advertise that, our hotels, our beaches are clean and everything. The general public from throughout the country are apparently not believing that. So there is a tremendous impact there. Also, our charter boat captains, the fishing people that take the people out on fishing expeditions and fishing, they're losing a lot of business there also. Also, the concern is, last month I was on a cruise through the Panama Canal going from San Diego to Tampa, and the ship was going to let off 800 people in Tampa and then was proceeding to Mobile to let off the remaining 1,400. Well, in the disembarkation, they were mentioning that they may not be able to go to Mobile because of the oil, and the reason being because those ships do desalination in order to get their fresh water. So, in essence, and they also use it to cool their engines. So my question would be, what happens to the cruise industry? We're looking at Galveston, New Orleans, Mobile, Tampa, and if it gets in the Gulf Stream, we're going to talk about Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Charleston, and Baltimore. I mean, it could totally cut down the cruise industry. Now, that I haven't seen or heard anything on in the media about that. And the other thing I'm thinking about is I've watched on different news medias about things we could do. We're using the booms right now, but if you get waves, the oil is just going to go over the booms. I've seen these membranes that will capture the oil but let fresh water or water go through. And I've also heard of the hair situation. I know my colleague from Fort Myers probably could contribute some, but the one from Pembroke Pines, well, looking at there's not much there, so I don't know if that would work. But did we ever consider hay? I've also seen hay. Now, if hay could be dropped from ships or boats or helicopters or something like that before it gets to the coastlines, wouldn't that, it gets into the marsh areas, couldn't that absorb a lot of it and then be raked up as it comes to closer to the shore? I know I'm going from here to there, but the cruise industry could really be affected. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, let me do the cruise piece for a little bit, and then when I ring off, I'm sure Commerce can also address that piece as well. Right now, and I think it's also really important to make your remarks, Mayor, to me ring a couple of things in my head. I was thinking. The first is that although it may seem as though, one beach isn't affected versus another, as I heard your president say earlier, really any coastal community, really the country at large, but I think the coastal community feels it first, even more than the rest of the country, is affected. I went down with a congressional delegation with the 2 U.S. senators from the state of Maryland, where I live, and Maryland and the Louisiana Gulf Coast are like siblings in a way. The crabs that people believe and love to eat on the eastern shore of Maryland with Old Bay seasoning, many of them, especially this time of year, come from the Gulf because they're not in yet in the Chesapeake Bay. So coastal communities, I don't think any coastal mayor should feel as though this is something that can be limited in terms of scope. Your question on cruises is a great example of that. Right now, there is, my understanding, ample opportunity for folks to avoid the areas of greatest known impact. What I think that the ship was saying is that can change every day, and I'll let Noah address it. I'm going to bring that back to the National Incident Command as well, because I think it's a very, very good point. So far, they have worked very hard to make sure shipping in general is not impacted. And we have a huge advantage right now in the Mississippi River because that was sort of ground zero for shipping, but the river was running at its highest point. Most freshwater was, and so the flow of these mighty rivers, the Mississippi the mightiest, helps keep the oil out of the inlet into the freshwater system, and that provides a safe buffer for ships. They're just going around. They're still using the Mississippi. So it's a little premature to probably worry about shipping, but I think we should be keeping an eye on it and what that impact would mean, not just for cruises, but just across the shipping industry if we get into a point where we have to close shipping channels. And I understand what you're saying about the cruise industry needing to be ever more certain of that issue because of drinking water issues and desalination issues and de-oil as well. They can handle some amount of that, but I'll let Commerce follow up on that issue. And then as far as innovative technologies, let me say I hosted myself last Saturday, not yesterday, but a week before in New Orleans, an innovative technology workshop. We had scientists there from all along the Gulf Coast, mainly from Louisiana, just by travel money. But we had Alabama, Mississippi, and I don't remember, I think we might have had one person come from Florida. But there's a lot of innovative technology that has been tried in the marshes. When it comes to the marshes, is a pilot going on with bagasse, which is, as all of you know, the sugarcane remnants after you get the juice out of it. A lot of those kinds of hay, bagasse hair, are really wonderful polishers. But what seems to work really well on beaches for the Florida mares is this stuff called snare boom. If you haven't seen it, it looks exactly like small pom-poms, like a cheerleader would have, except every one of those pieces of what would normally be paper in the old days is almost like thousands of tiny some kind of plastic hairs. And the oil, as you've seen, that oil is very sticky and it's very much attracted to its own kind. And so it gloms onto that snare boom. That snare boom is light enough, it can be set, it will rise and flow with the tide. And that seems to work really well in Grand Isle. I've watched it there a couple times and a few places in Louisiana where the oil came up first on more of a sandy, non-marshy substrate. So what we learned about the work is that there's lots of work that's been tried. Oil spills are not new in the Gulf. They're not new in the marshes. It's just the scale. And the very best things are mechanical. Burning works really well out at sea. Booming works really well, except it is weather dependent. Dispersants can be a helpful tool. I just do not believe they should be the first place we go, and we should minimize their use in general because people worry about them at a rate that might even be disproportionate to their use, but they're just worried, and there's no reason for people to worry one more time. And then, of course, collection, skimming. And I think the constant push to get more and more and more skimmers near shore is a very important one, and I know it's one that Admiral Allen has been working hard on.
I have just want to make sure that we put things in a little bit perspective. While we've been talking about the harm, while I've been talking about what could happen in the negative part of this, I just want to emphasize Florida is open. Florida is open for business. I can't emphasize that more. Our tourist industry is there. Disneyland is open. Our beaches are clean. We want people to come to the state of Florida. We want them to come everywhere they can. So although we're talking about the disaster, it has not hit Florida. Please, I don't want to leave a message to anybody that we're not welcoming tourists and to our state. We need that economy, and everything is open. I want to make sure everybody understands that, and I think to a certain extent even the other states as well. So I will not leave out Louisiana or Alabama or Mississippi in that. I think for the most part, a lot of it's still there and open. We're just preparing for the worst and hoping for the best. And right now, we're open and ready for business. Thank you.
The French Quarter didn't close when Katrina hit, so we know New Orleans is open too.
There are oysters in Apalachicola, Florida.
Okay. We have Ms. Jackson, we have someone else who wishes to ask a question. Mayor, please give your name and city for Ms. Jackson.
Mike Belsky from Highland Park, Illinois, but I do have a question regarding finances down there. Some of these cities rely heavily on sales tax-backed bonds, tourism tax-backed bonds, and when those revenue sources are down, even property values go down. Is the federal government planning to make sure that those communities are guaranteed on their debt in the event that they fall below the debt service?
We talked about that in our meeting the other day, but go ahead, Madam Administrator.
Well, I'm going to let you answer, Mayor, because it's sort of outside of my lanes for sure, except to say that the President really means it when he says, first and foremost, this is BP's spill, and he wants an accurate and constant review of claims and claim issues associated with individual businesses. But those start to ball up into larger community-based issues, and he believes BP should be responsible for those. But he's also activated, I would call it, the full weight of the federal emergency response when it comes to financial emergency responses. So whether that's SBA or Commerce, whether that's Treasury, I think you'll also get a sense from Commerce as well as from the mayor of what we're able to do. Now, mayors, I'm going to have to ring off in about 2 or 3 minutes. So if there's any other specific question, let me give one more plug for the EPA data site. The reason for that is because we have air sampling. We take dozens of air samples every day. We've taken well over 1,000. The air has no, at near shore, there's no compounds that are outside the normal ranges for this time of year. If you get questions like that, we're working very closely with health professionals in the state and local governments. So we have information up there for you, all to use to, again, assure people that while this is a catastrophe, it is one that is being probably as closely managed as anything we've done. The one thing I tell people to remember is that Gulf Coast is being, those beaches and that area is being more highly monitored than any place on the planet right now. And so we know for sure when we say that the air is within normal levels that we have the data to back that up. So if you need anything from us in terms of environmental impact, environmental data, things we can do to help you, we are happy to work with your local governments, your county governments to get it done. And I just want to thank you, mayors, again for your leadership.
Yeah, thank you. Administrator Jackson, thank you so much for giving us your time. We really appreciate it. You shed some light on some of the questions that we have, and we really appreciate your candidness with us. This is President of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, Elizabeth Kautz. Thank you so much. Mr. Ramos, can you come to the microphone, please? I think we have some questions for you, and that was the last question that had to do with the response on bonds and other revenue sources. The last question, Mayor from Illinois.
Highland Park.
Yes.
It was on the bonding of.
On the support.
On the support.
On support after this, and whether or not there will be any forgiveness for one reason, or whether those businesses that are going to be impacted negatively by this, and they're will not receive the kind of revenues, will there be any kind of federal support in terms of forgiveness of debt or whatever?
Well, that's
support?
part of what is being looked at holistically as to how it's going to be addressed at the back end. I mean, we're studying that right now. As Administrator Jackson said, the President has asked all of his entire administration to really push hard and make sure that everyone is made whole, both financially and we're doing as much as possible environmentally on that area.
Yes.
Thank you.
Let me just, again, follow up on this. A lot of these towns and cities were in dire financial straits before the storm.
Yes.
They've had to cut basic services, make other adjustments in order to just meet their budget without a deficit. Now that problem is aggravated because that other income stream that they planned on when they made those budgets, that income stream now has been ruptured. So I'm hearing what you're saying in regards to these plans are in place down the line, and these cities will be reimbursed and they'll have to go through BP and all of that. But by the time they go through the regulatory maze, those cities will be ghost towns. So what happens to police, fire, EMS, your hospital services, your infrastructure, and all the other things that people depend upon our governments collectively to provide? If there's not some way to fast track what needs to go to these cities, then they're basically out of business. And I'm trying to figure out then what plan is in place other than saying it's BP, where everybody has to now go and file a suit, prove their claims, and go through all of this red tape. What is there to put these cities back on a fast track to make sure they don't fail and can still deliver the quality services to those citizens that have put them in office?
It is a great question. It's one of the myriad of issues that we're dealing with, and unfortunately it's part of the entire claims process, and it's part of what we're trying to address. Part of the questions that Mayor Landrieu spoke with our Assistant Secretary of Economic Development Administration yesterday before his presentation here at the conference. So it's something that it is being worked on through SBA and through the claims process that has been put in motion. I mean, there's no easy answer right now, and it's something that I would have to come back with a more concrete answer, but right now it's through the claims process.
Mr. Ramos, one moment. I think one of the things that may be considered is the waive of rules and regs on some of these issues. Waiving rules and regs during a crisis of this magnitude to municipal governments. And I think it would behoove the administration to bring the mayors into the conversation for solving this problem, because mayors know what we live with, and mayors can bring solutions to the table. But to address this issues absent mayors at the table, you all are going to be making decisions, and you don't really understand what our business is. So please.
I'll definitely bring that back.
Yes,
to
and a waive of rules and regs can help. But I would recommend highly that the mayors are at the table when you're looking to solve these issues.
Bring that back to my colleagues at the White House.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Ramos.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mayors, did you have anything else that you want to address before I open it up to our membership to also speak to you? Mayor Frank? Is Mayor Landrieu still on? I don't think so. Now, I didn't think that Mayor Landrieu was going to be sitting through all of that. Would you, Mayor? I'm a mayor, you're a mayor. We all know. If nobody's, we're off.
Yeah.
Well, there is another, I think we kind of addressed it. A lot of people are being paid immediately, small chunks of change immediately, and that's good. But I am hearing that if a claim is more than $5,000, if it's more than $5,000, just what you said or your suggestion, Madam President, should happen is not happening. And they're having to go through all kinds of hoops, all kinds of claims process with BP in order to recover if it's more than $5,000. I think the threshold is $5,000. Maybe the mayor of Fort Myers may have something about that.
I just want to share, Madam President, when you announced that the mayors are down on the ground and we know what's going on, I was sitting, and I shared this with Mayor Landrieu yesterday morning, and I'm sitting in a directors meeting last week down in Fort Myers, where one of my fellow directors at this particular bank board that I serve on said to me, Mayor, he owns a resort on Fort Myers Beach. I've had 12 cancellations this week, and they have sent us email approval. We've got it documented, and we're filing our claim with BP. Is that what we should be doing? We mayors are going to be approached in this way. Mm-hmm. And you couldn't be more right in your announcement. And here's what I can share, as I shared yesterday morning, that's worrisome, Mr. Ramos, is that it's been reported that BP's net worth is about $120 billion.
Yep.
And so therefore the question is, as the tiny amounts are being paid along the way, just how far can $120 billion go?
Right.
And then when these nickel-dime claims, tens of thousands, turn into tens of millions, perhaps billions. And here's one quick example, and I'll sit down. Some real estate sales that I'm aware of in the Keys and beyond, in the Florida Keys, Isla Mirada specifically, have now come into focus as people are looking to relocate into way of a secondary home down there. And they're looking at homes that approach 1.6, 1.7 million per purchase. Is what's going to happen when several people look at these homes and then the realtor reports back to the owner, they love the home. They almost went to contract. While they were watching CNN or Fox News last night, they learned that it is in the loop current. They're going to wait a couple of years. Let this settle. Now, does that turn into a $1.7 billion claim to BP? So you can begin to understand the massiveness of how they can add up. Thank you.
Well, can I just make a comment, Mayor? The question you're getting to is what the hell happens when BP goes bankrupt?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and so,
thank you.
And so where's the federal government to be ready for that?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Cochran, your point is dead on. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, it appears that BP doesn't want to go bankrupt, according to the British press. They are not. They're responding. They're worried about the pension funds of their folks, rather as opposed to what's happening in the Gulf oil place. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're trying to limit the conversation to mayors, but I know that you have a very important agenda, and your agenda has to do with
solving the financial problems that cities are in, and it would also solve. It is basically solving the financial problems that cities are in as of this legislation having been passed. So it would also solve the financial problems that the Gulf cities would be in.
Yeah, I think you can, if mayors are interested, they can approach you for your literature. But I think this is not the place for you to give out your literature when we're trying to speak.
I don't basically want my literature not, drop it. But somebody should know about it, what's in it.
Yes, and I think I see mayors who have received your literature, and so they are nodding their heads.
But they don't read it.
Oh, I understand that they've read it. Yes.
Mr. Cochran,
so, thank you.
New Orleans meeting.
Thank you. Mayor, please.
Thank you. Again, Bill Mishler, Mayor, Pinellas Park, Florida. And what Tom said, what happens if BP, tomorrow afternoon we hear at 3 o'clock news on Fox or CNN or what, they declare bankruptcy? Does the federal government have a plan, an alternate plan to step in? What's going to happen? Or are we just going to keep flowing oil?
I think I read, somebody told me just a while ago that President Obama is meeting with BP in the White House on Wednesday. Does anybody know anything about that? So that tells me something, quote, is going on. I heard that. And he's going to address the nation tonight.
Yes, I'm going to go to Mayor Holden, and I think because one of the things is that we don't know the answer, we're all speculating.
It just seems like to me that the federal government should have been more involved now.
This was a big issue in our meeting yesterday.
And Mayor, I think one of the things we should be focusing on is that what message we want to send the White House so that they understand what our concern is, that what happens if BP is bankrupt, what happens then?
And I would just want to follow up on your point. I think the message should be sent right away so it could be included in the conversation on Wednesday.
That's exactly it.
That question.
Exactly it.
The kinds of things that the mayors are being approached to. Mayor, what do we do? What if?
Yes.
Such as the examples that I gave.
Yes.
Those are very good.
Okay, please, and then because we have another mayor at the that wishes. Mayor, please. There's a microphone right by you.
We keep referencing, and I don't think it's a mistake that this is on our chairs. and
The
the work
Stafford
that
Act.
Nagin and also
is the Stafford Act.
Mayors Johnson did. And this points out, we're all talking about how we've experienced hurricanes, particularly in Florida. We're used to this. The Gulf Coast is used to this. But we need to make sure that this message is heard to ensure that this addresses some of those current concerns. And to me, it makes sense that this is a FEMA response. This is a long-term response, because those same
all
fishermen
in here.
that may not restart their jobs may need to look to relocate. So when they go to SPA and just apply for a $5,000 loan, we need to look at this whole work product. And I think they should be commended, but there's flaws in the existing response, and that's why we addressed it at the beginning.
And that's the reason why this is there. This is work that we've been working on since Katrina. And so, mayors, we have it. Please, Mayor.
Yeah, what I would suggest as a, I guess, this constructive approach to the federal government, and this is no different than what was done with the banks. And I can tell you a lot of the states are using ARRA funds just to paper over deficits as opposed to towards infrastructure.
We're quite aware of that.
So I kind of wrote something. I said communities impacted by the spill with outstanding debt backed by property sales, tourism, hotel taxes, water fees and charges such as water and sewer bonds. The Treasury should make sure any debt service payments are sum sufficient so that they don't fall below 100%. And also any reserve funds that are drawn on by these communities should be replenished by the Treasury. And I would suggest any reimbursement come directly from the Treasury, and that the money from BP go to the Treasury, and that can be used first to make these cities whole. And then if it's depleted or they go bankrupt, it would then be the Treasury's responsibility, no different than what they're doing for banks.
Makes
Thank
sense.
you. I think we have
Gotta do the
some of
resolution.
our staff that is taking notes, and we could put something together that will address some of that.
Together for the White House.
Yeah, and I see we've got Laura here, one of our staff members. They're writing furiously, and a resolution will be put in place.
Yeah.
Next, Mayor, please.
While the next mayor is coming up, we have a resolution. It's on your chair. If anybody else wants to sign on to the resolution, please let us know and tell the staff
Now,
about
is
that.
this the
Okay.
resolution that you're walking it on tomorrow?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so remember, mayors, when this resolution comes to the floor, it needs 2/3
2/3 to be
to
considered.
be considered. 2/3 to even be considered. So if you want, so read that resolution and then be prepared, because it needs 2/3 to be considered for a discussion and a vote. Okay?
All right, and if you want to sign on, please sign on. The more we have sign on, obviously, the better we're going to get to 2/3. I feel confident we'll get to 2/3, but let's make sure.
Okay. Mr. Cochran, I think I'm getting cues from all over the place, but please, before we adjourn this meeting, I need for you to talk about the request from Mayor Landrieu.
Yes, many of you were at our press conference the other day, and we're asking mayors to come to the Gulf the evening of the 20th, and we will have a full day agenda on the 21st. That agenda will be developed in the next 24 hours. Mayor Landrieu's staff and I are working on it now with my staff. And we encourage you to come. Every time we turn around, you've got, as you know, you got Texas, Louisiana, and the Gulf states going all the way around to Florida and wrapping up around North Carolina. And Mayor Hayes was talking about Arkansas today. So come stand with the mayors in solidarity on the 21st in New Orleans. And I want to also, if I could just give a shout out to the state leagues of the National League of Cities. Don Board is here and Carolyn is here. And with Katrina, when we went down into the Gulf, those state leagues were down there with us working it, and the chair here is from Florida. So we have to come together, I think, and stand together. And, you know, it's amazing how smart we are from one day to the next. So I will be ready to discuss this to the nation when there's a magic of mayors when we all come together. So come to New Orleans. We'll be at the Roosevelt Hotel on the night of the 20th, and we'll get up and work all day and go home Monday night. And we'll be sending you an email and notice on this. Thank you.
Mayors, is there anything lingering on your mind? Mayor Nutter, please.
Madam President, I'm sorry. I read through the resolution very quickly, and I know that we're asking for more information and better coordination with all the mayors. And many of us, whether you're in the Gulf area or not, I think all of us will ultimately be affected by this. The one thing, I was just having some conversation, it was somewhat apparent over the phone call, and I know that EPA is, I guess, part of the lead right now. I guess my concern is if something, maybe not exactly this magnitude, but if some really bad thing happened in one of our cities, ultimately it's left to us to figure out who's the person, who's the part of the government that is actually going to be in charge all the time.
Joe Riley.
Over a consistent
remember.
Period. I mean, you have the, right now the focus
Who's
is
the leading
on
agent?
stop the flow and try to clean it up.
Right.
Yeah.
Business damage, people damage, all the others. I mean, this is going to go on for a long time. I don't understand how EPA is going to deal with this over some period of time. I mean, it was already said by the administrator, well, if this was on land, we'd be the lead, but now it's in the water, so it's the Coast Guard. I mean, the Coast Guard, so
Mayor
there are a
Riley.
ton of folks involved. So I'm just wondering one last thing in terms of this resolution. Are we asking that someone, some agency, short, medium, and long term, have the direct and ultimate responsibility for dealing with this?
Mayor Riley asked the same point yesterday morning.
Okay.
You will recall in the meeting, and he, and so we do need to include that.
Well,
Yes,
no,
and I
it's already in
understand.
the, if you look at number 8.
Maybe I missed it.
Let's be more specific about it.
Yeah.
Well, it is, you may want to just add a line, but number 8 virtually tries to spell out all of the different agencies that are involved.
Right, I
Process.
understand. And
But the mayor
my
is
only
saying,
question is, I
who
don't know
is?
of any person that's in charge of all these folks. I mean, other than the president.
Because it doesn't happen that way. When from the hurricanes to you name it, everybody has a statutory role in terms of what they need to do. And I don't know how we as mayors can say, this person is in charge.
I'm not suggesting that we say. I'm suggesting that we ask the
That's
President
fine.
of the United States of America
have it coordinated.
No.
tell somebody to be in charge and tell these folks what to do.
Yeah, just
Mayor, you know what? Here's what I would suggest. We add another, be it further resolved. Can you amend that? Put a further resolve that will be probably some. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I saw what you were trying to do with
Sure.
all the agencies. Again, I don't know, other than the president or vice president, anybody that's in charge of all these folks. Someone has to be able to tell all of them, this is what we want done.
Okay.
Yeah, you're absolutely
We're
right,
fine.
because if it were in cities, guess who is in charge?
Right.
The mayor.
The city manager, the managing director.
And that's not the
Yeah.
governor of each state. I mean, that's,
Yeah. One at a time, one at a time. The U.S. Conference of Mayors also urges the president to establish a special task force of senior federal officials. Well, it says mayors and other local elected officials from local areas that have been or are likely to be affected.
let's let Laura.
Let's have some of the folks to do the resolve, and then we'll have it all ready for tomorrow.
Laura Waxman's are you going to be
Laura
one
is going
person?
to work with the
Judy?
one.
Yeah.
Yes, and we'll have our staff begin to make those inquiries so that, and then make sure that we add, and then the co-sponsors of the resolution would all have to be signed on. And remember, it is a 2/3 vote of the body. Anything else? Would not. Thank you so much, mayors and guests, for being present with us. We appreciate you and your
Great job.
engagement. Thank you so much. We are adjourned.